The telegram sat on the desk for 3 hours before anyone touched it. It had arrived that morning at the small production office in Rome, delivered by a boy on a bicycle who didn't wait for a reply. The paper was thin, the letters typed in all capitals, the message short. It came from the studio executives in Los Angeles, and it said exactly what everyone in the room had been afraid it would say. Eastwood not working, stop, find replacement, stop, shoot begins in 2 weeks, stop. Outside, the Roman sun beat down on narrow streets. Inside, Sergio Leone sat in a wooden chair, smoking a cigarette, staring at nothing. He was 34 years old. He had directed small films, director roles, scenes for other people's projects. This Western, this strange, violent, Italian-made Western shot in Spain with a mostly European crew, was supposed to be his chance. His first real film, his vision. And the studio wanted to take away his lead actor. Clint Eastwood had been in Rome for 6 weeks. He had signed the contract, done the costume fittings, learned the locations. He was lean, quiet, American. He moved slowly. He spoke less. Leone had chosen him specifically for that, for the way he could say nothing and still fill a frame, for the way his face stayed still while his eyes said everything. But the studio didn't see it. They had watched the early screen tests. They had seen Eastwood walk through the mock-up sets, rehearse a few lines, stand in doorways with that long coat and that flat-brimmed hat. And they didn't believe in him. He was too unknown, too stiff, too quiet. He had spent years on American television playing a cowboy, but television wasn't cinema. Television was small. This film needed presence. It needed star power. It needed someone audiences would pay to see. Eastwood wasn't that. Not yet. The producer, a man named Colombo, stood near the window. He was the one who had to make the call. He was the one who had to tell Leone that the money, the small, fragile budget they had fought for, was conditional. The investors wanted someone recognizable, someone safer. They had already suggested names: Charles Bronson, Henry Fonda, Steve McQueen if they could afford him. Leone didn't respond. He kept smoking. His face was heavy, tired. He had fought for months to get this film made. He had written the script himself, borrowed from Kurosawa, stripped the Western down to something raw and strange. He had imagined every shot, every angle, every moment of silence. And all of it depended on a man who didn't perform like other actors. A man who understood that less could be more. But the studio didn't care about vision. They cared about safety. Colombo finally spoke. His voice was careful, apologetic. Sergio, we have 2 weeks. If we don't start shooting, we lose the locations. We lose everything. They want an answer today. Leone stubbed out his cigarette. He stood up slowly. He looked at the telegram one more time, then he looked at Colombo. No. Colombo blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean, we keep Clint. We shoot the film. They'll see. Sergio, they won't release it. If you don't replace him, they'll pull the funding. You know this. Leone walked to the window. He stared out at the street below. A woman was hanging laundry on a line stretched between 2 buildings. A man was unloading crates from a truck. Ordinary people doing ordinary things. None of them knew that a few floors above them, a film was about to collapse before it even began. Leone's voice was quiet when he spoke again. I didn't come this far to make someone else's film. Colombo didn't argue. He had known Leone long enough to recognize the tone. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that didn't bend. But certainty didn't pay bills. It didn't finish films. And it didn't convince studios. That night, Leone went to see Eastwood. He found him in a small hotel near the Spanish Steps, sitting alone in the restaurant, eating bread and drinking red wine. Eastwood looked up when Leone sat down across from him. He didn't smile. He just waited. Leone told him everything: the telegram, the studio's demands, the pressure to replace him, the 2-week deadline. He didn't soften it. He didn't try to reassure him. He just laid it out, plain and honest. Eastwood listened without interrupting. His face didn't change. When Leone finished, Eastwood took a sip of wine, set the glass down, and leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to do?" Leone almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the most American thing he had ever heard. No panic, no self-pity, just a question. "I want to make the film," Leone said. "With you." Eastwood nodded slowly. "Then let's make it. They might not release it. Then they don't release it. You'll have wasted 2 months. I've wasted more time on worse things." Leone studied him. This tall, quiet American who had flown across the ocean to play a role in a film no one believed in, for a director no one had heard of, in a genre that was already dying. He didn't seem worried. He didn't seem afraid. He just seemed ready. Leone made his decision that night. He would shoot the film. He would ignore the studio. He would bet everything on this man who barely spoke, who moved like he had all the time in the world, who could make silence feel dangerous. 2 weeks later, they began filming in the desert outside Almera, Spain. The heat was crushing. The crew was small, mostly Italian and Spanish. None of them famous. The budget was so tight that they reused costumes, built sets out of scrap wood, shot scenes in single takes to save film. Eastwood wore the same poncho every day. It smelled like dust and sweat. His hat was bent, stained. His cigar was cheap. But on camera, he was something else. Leone had been right. Eastwood didn't act the way other actors acted. He didn't emote. He didn't perform. He simply existed inside the frame. He walked into a town, and you believed he had killed men. He stared at someone, and you believed he was deciding whether to kill them now. He lit a cigar, and the whole scene stopped to watch. The crew started to feel it. The way the camera loved him. The way silence around him became tension. The way his stillness made everything else feel frantic. But back in Rome, the studio still didn't believe. They received reports from the set. They saw photographs. They heard that Leone was shooting long, slow scenes with almost no dialogue. They heard that Eastwood barely spoke, that whole sequences played out in looks and movements. And they hated it. It wasn't what Westerns were supposed to be. It wasn't John Wayne. It wasn't heroic speeches and fast draws and clear morality. It was cold. It was strange. It was too much silence and too much violence, and a hero who didn't feel like a hero. They sent another telegram. This one was angrier. Footage unacceptable, stop, replace lead, or shut down production, stop, final warning, stop. Leone didn't respond. He kept shooting. Colombo tried to mediate, tried to buy time, tried to explain Leone's vision to men who didn't care about vision. The studio threatened to pull the remaining funds. They threatened to bury the film. They threatened to make sure Leone never worked again, but Leone kept shooting. And Eastwood kept showing up. Every morning before the sun rose, he was on set. He didn't complain about the heat, the long hours, the cheap food, the uncertainty. He trusted Leone. He trusted the process. And slowly, scene by scene, he built something no one had seen before. A man with no name, no past, no softness. A man who killed without hesitation and saved people without explanation. a man who was both terrifying and magnetic. The film wrapped in late autumn. Leone edited it himself, in a small room in Rome, cutting it down to 99 minutes of violence, silence, and strange beauty. He showed it to Colombo first, then to a small group of Italian distributors. No one knew what to make of it. It was too weird, too slow, too different. The music, composed by Ennio Morricone, didn't sound like anything else. Whistles, electric guitars, trumpets that screamed like dying animals. The hero didn't win through honor. He won through cunning and cruelty. The film didn't care about being liked. The studio in Los Angeles refused to release it in America. They shelved it. They moved on. But in Italy, a small distributor took a chance. They released it in January of 1964, in a handful of theaters, with no marketing, no stars, no expectations. And something happened. People came. They came back. They brought friends. The theaters stayed packed. Word spread. This strange, violent, silent Western with the unknown American actor became the thing everyone was talking about. It played for weeks, then months. It moved to Germany, to France, to Spain. By spring, it was the highest-grossing film in Europe. By summer, Clint Eastwood was famous. Not in America, not yet. But everywhere else, his face was on posters. His poncho was being copied. His silence had become iconic. He had become the man with no name, and people couldn't get enough of him. The studio executives in Los Angeles heard the news. They saw the box office numbers. They saw the lines outside theaters in Paris, in Rome, in Madrid. And quietly, without announcement, they released the film in America. It exploded. Audiences who had grown tired of clean, moral westerns found something raw and real. Critics who had dismissed it as cheap European exploitation started writing essays about Leone's vision, about Eastwood's presence, about the way the film had reinvented the genre. Eastwood became a superstar. Not the kind who smiled and waved. The kind who didn't have to. The kind whose silence was louder than anyone else's words. Leone directed 2 more films with him. Each one bigger. Each one stranger. Each one more successful. By the time they finished, Eastwood was one of the most famous actors in the world, and the studio that had wanted to replace him, that had sent telegrams demanding he be cut, that had threatened to destroy the film, claimed credit for discovering him. Eastwood never forgot. Years later, when he was directing his own films, producing his own projects, controlling his own career, he remembered the telegram. He remembered the studio executives who hadn't believed in him. He remembered the 2 months in Spain, when everything hung by a thread, when he and Leone made a film no one wanted. And he remembered the lesson. Belief doesn't come from safety. It comes from risk, from stubbornness, from the refusal to let other people's fear dictate your choices. Leone taught him that, not with words, with action, by ignoring the telegrams, by shooting the film anyway, by trusting his vision more than he trusted the money. And Eastwood carried that forward. Every film he made, every role he chose, every time someone told him it wouldn't work, that he was too old, too quiet, too different, he remembered Rome. He remembered the desert. He remembered the man who refused to replace him. The telegram still exists somewhere, in a studio archive, buried in a file of forgotten correspondence. A piece of paper that tried to kill a career before it started. A warning that was ignored. And because it was ignored, everything changed. Not just for Eastwood, not just for Leone, but for Westerns, for cinema, for the way people understood what a hero could be. The man with no name became the template, the quiet loner, the violent savior, the anti-hero who didn't explain himself. He walked into towns, solved problems, and walked out. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask for permission. And audiences loved him for it. Because he was real in a way other heroes weren't. He was dangerous. He was unpredictable. He was someone you couldn't control. Just like the actor who played him. Just like the director who refused to let him go. 2 months after the studio demanded his replacement, Clint Eastwood was an international superstar. 2 months after that, he was a legend. And the people who had tried to stop it, who had sent the telegrams, who had demanded someone safer, were left explaining how they had almost destroyed the thing they would later take credit for creating. But they didn't create it. Leone created it by believing when no one else did. Eastwood created it by trusting a vision he didn't fully understand. And together, in the desert, with no money and no support and no safety net, they made something that would outlive all of them. The film still plays. The image still endures. The poncho, the cigar, the squint, the silence. And somewhere in a drawer or a box or a forgotten folder, a telegram sits yellowing. A warning, a demand, a threat, ignored. And the world is different because of it.